A little video on the parts of the eye and light through the eye. Okay, first of all, we need to know there are three layers of the eye. There's the sclera, which is the white of the eye. In this model, it's shown here, the white of the eye. Okay, and then next to the white of the eye is going to be the choroid layer, the pigmented part. The anterior part of the choroid layer is called the ciliary body, and it has the ciliary muscle with suspensory ligaments that hold the lens in place. And also we have the iris, which is the colored part of the eye. And the opening in the iris is the pupil. Now the third layer is the retina, which is the nerve tissue layer. And on this model it shows us a sort of a pink area. The lines here represent blood vessels, which are actually between the retina and the choroid layer. At the back here, where the fibers are leaving and blood vessels are entering, that's called the blind spot or optic disc. Off to the side, where the light actually comes to a focus at the back, that's called the macula lutea. It has cones, a few rods, but mostly cones. In the center of the macula lutea, the yellow dot here, is the fovea centralis. That's the area of most acute vision. It has only cones. Okay, now the lens is held in place by the suspensory ligament, and as you're looking at something at a distance, the ciliary muscle relaxes. It pulls on the lens, it gets thinner, but the muscle is relaxed. Then when you're looking at something very close, the ciliary muscle contracts, pulls forward, retina forward slightly, and allows the lens to bulge, and then you see something close by. You get tireder because the muscles are being used. You do not burn up a lot of calories, unfortunately. Okay, but that's important. Now, irregularities of the cornea, on the sclera, on the anterior part of the sclera is the cornea, which is transparent. But irregularities in the shape of that could cause your materials to look blurred at the edge. We call that astigmatism. Okay, now there are two fluids in the eye. In the outer chamber between the cornea and the iris and the lens behind it, that is going to have a fluid called aqueous humor. Aqueous humor is constantly being filtered, blood is constantly being filtered by cells in the ciliary body to form the aqueous humor, and it moves up behind the lens and through the pupil and against the cornea to give it nutrients and oxygen, and then it's drained away through some blood vessels in the ciliary body called the canal of Schlemm. It's a little venous structure, so that this is constantly being flowing, and that carries oxygen and nutrients to those cells that don't have blood vessels, such as the cornea. Now in the back chamber, the large chamber, posterior chamber, you have a jelly-like material. It's called the vitreous body or vitreous humor. It's held in place by the hyaloid membrane. The lens would fit right in here. Okay, now as light comes through, light's going to come through the cornea, through the aqueous humor, through the pupil, through the lens, through the ligament, membrane, hyaloid membrane holding this in place, through the vitreous body. To the back, there'll be the axons of the ganglion neurons, through the cell bodies of ganglion neurons, and the hyaloid membranes holding that in place, bipolar neurons, and then the rods and cones. The rods and cones are facing away from the light source, so we have an inverted retina. They face away, but if enough light intensity is strong enough, it starts an impulse in those neurons. The cones are involved in bright light right now, the cones, and if we reduce the light, then it would be the rods that would be working. So the cones are going to be concentrated in that fovea centralis within the macula lutea. Whether it's reduced light or whether it's a bright light, once the light intensity is enough to stimulate those cells, sodium goes in, potassium goes out, it starts an impulse, and now the impulse goes from either the rods or cones, depending on which one's stimulated, into the bipolar neurons, to the ganglion neurons, and the axons of ganglion neurons, and it moves on back and leaves through the optic disc or the blind spot into the optic nerve. The medial fibers of the optic nerve cross over in the optic chiasma. Then the lateral fibers go straight back to the lateral geniculate body of the thalamus, a relay station, remember, for most sensory information. From there it goes to the optic radiation, finally to the occipital lobe of the brain for interpretation. That's all.